In this video, let's talk about tea as you've seen it in the story of Minglan. Hi, you're watching Avenue X, where junkie and good storytelling shares their thoughts, knowledge, and occasional weird ideas of stories and how they're told. The story of Minglan, 知否知否,应是绿肥红瘦, is close to finish airing. We are currently in the sort of last quarter of the whole drama. Throughout the drama, there are a lot of representations of the Song Dynasty culture that are no longer practiced today in China. Although I wouldn't say its representations are very accurate to history, but it does refer to certain cultural practices that used to be extremely important. So today I want to introduce one particular thing, which is called 点茶. In this drama, you'll see it being referred to many times. Sometimes just as a prop on the side. Sometimes people are interacting with the tea, and sometimes they actually talk directly about tea making. So tea, obviously, everybody knows, it comes from China. It's a long history of cultural practices. But the way we drink tea, which is brewing today, is actually not established until rather recently, from Ming Dynasty onwards. Before that, tea was actually consumed and done in very different ways throughout history. And today we're looking at Norse Song. First half of Song Dynasty is actually the most culturally and economically developed dynasty. And it is at this time that tea drinking becomes something extremely different from previous dynasties. If you are a fan of Japanese culture, you definitely know about matcha and Japanese tea ceremony, where you have this extremely fine and powdery tea people use, and they use this whisk to beat it to the foamy texture and drink that. This actually comes from the Song Dynasty's practice of 点茶, but the Song people do it a bit differently. Today, not many people are practicing that in China. Very few people know how to do it, and there are people who are trying to recreate what historically people have done with tea in Song Dynasty based on written documents, texts, every reference they can find, because this practice has actually stopped and been forgotten for hundreds of years. So it's impossible to 100% replicate that today. To make Song Dynasty style 点茶, obviously first you have to have tea. The particular type of tea back then they used is extremely complicated to make and very expensive. The top quality tea can equal the price of gold, and today it's impossible to recreate that. The tea would go through fermenting, compressing, baking, a lot of processes until it resembles a brick. But that's probably the most expensive and edible brick ever produced in human history. Once you have the tea, you need to grind it to extremely fine powder, similar to what you have today as Japanese matcha. Then you need a particular type of cup, which is quite deep set, that will allow you to actually beat a thick layer of foam out of this tea. You need to warm this cup first, and then add a few grams of those powder. Then you pour water into it, but very little, so that first you use this bamboo whisk to create a very thick paste. Once the paste is nice and uniform, you start to pour hot water and beat your tea. Throughout Song Dynasty, there are different styles of doing this. Different people prefer different ways. We can read from records that the emperor actually really liked adding 7 times of water and beating it 7 times. Eventually, the ideal way is you create such a thick layer of milky white, fine and firm foam out of your tea. That would create an extremely thick mouthfeel and texture when you drink it, similarly as if you are drinking milk. And supposedly that will bring out all the benefit in the tea. Before we go to the conclusion of this video, I want to say a big thank you to all my patrons on Patreon. Baby Seal, 不消残酒. I know where that name comes from. Hafiz Adam, somebody who has been with my Patreon from the earliest day. Hannah QJ, Helly Antilla, Joe Lin, Lucy Zhu, Ladine Taylor, also a veteran patron. Ling Ling HK, who has also been with me for quite some time. And the newcomer Nang Kira Cao. I have no idea how to pronounce her name, sorry. Thank you guys so much for supporting me on Patreon. And I also have a Discord server. The link is in the description below. If you want to discuss Chinese culture, language, Chinese drama with me and a lot of other enthusiasts, you are always welcome. So that's how tea was done in Song Dynasty. Isn't that super interesting? It's almost exact thing people do today with coffee, with espresso, with latte and cappuccino, and making those artwork on the top layer of foam. Chinese people were actually doing that 1,000 years ago with a different plant, tea. And historical records show us back then people actually did tea battles. So they would compete. Who can beat the thickest, the finest, the palest, like milk-like foam that would hang on the wall of the cup for the longest time? If you can get yourself into that zen zone, you can beat the best tea foams out. I would argue whether that is actually, like has anything to do with being zen or just being really, really well practiced. If you do it 1,000 times, you're gonna do it better than the people who only did it 500 times. But Eastern Asian culture has a lot of this type of practices, and I think it is really beneficial if you can sit down and have a very, very formal ceremony of doing something that's seemingly extremely simple and kind of meaningless, but it is a spiritual cleanse and it is a way to focus and completely be in the moment. So in that way, it is actually a very, very interesting and powerful cultural practice. It's a sad thing that it's no longer practiced today, but it's also a great thing to see today in China. A lot of younger generations, people who come from all kinds of backgrounds and trying to find out what people have done in this land 1,000 years ago, what we have forgotten that might still have value to contemporary people, and how we can try to bring that back to our life. I have linked some videos in the description about Song Dynasty Dian Cha. There's no English subtitles and they're not all on YouTube, but a couple of them are extremely informative, and I've based some of my explanations of Dian Cha on those videos. So if you've never heard about this Chinese tea making practices before, or if you've been watching the drama and you're wondering what they're doing, now you know. Thank you for watching Avenue X. I'll see you in my next video. Meanwhile, live long and happy drama watching.